So we'll do a summary of the Meir. We'll try to cover as much as we can within the hour, at least most of the Nekudas of the Meir. Not necessarily according to the whole structure of the Meir, but just at least the points of the Meir. So the pasuk, the Meir starts. The pasuk is "Va'ata Tzav es bnei Yisrael." The Moshe Rabbeinu will command Yidden, "V'yikchu elech Hashem en zayizach," and they will bring to Moshe Rabbeinu clear olive oil. Kosis will be crushed. Lamoir for the candle for the source of light. Lahalis ner tamid, in order for there to be and to light the menorah that should light constantly. And the Rebbe asked several questions on this. Number one, that the lashon that Torah uses here, "Va'ata Tzav es bnei Yisrael," is not the ordinary lashon that Torah, not the regular lashon that Torah uses. Usually, the expression that Torah uses when Hashem tells Moshe to give over a tziva to Yidden, the lashon is "Tzav es bnei Yisrael," "Dabra bnei Yisrael." Which just lashon indicates that the tziva, the mitzvah, the one that gave us the commandment, is Hashem. It's Hashem's commandment. Moshe Rabbeinu is just Dabra bnei Yisrael. He gives over the command. He communicates this commandment to Yidden. He gives it over to Yidden. Here, the lashon of the Torah is "Va'ata Tzav," that you will command. So the mashma says that Moshe is the one which is commanding. That's the chora Moshe. The tziva is the Eibusher's tziva, and he's giving it over to Yidden. Second question is, the pasuk says that Yidden should bring the oil to Moshe. Question is, the chora Arnakain is the one that's mekayim the mitzvah of Lagasan Eretz. So what was the purpose that Yidden should bring the oil to Moshe Rabbeinu? You don't find any other mitzvah that there's a necessity. It's necessary to bring the object of the mitzvah to Meir Rabbeinu. The third question is that the pasuk says causes to have oil, crushed oil for the mar, for the source of light. And the lashon, which the appropriate lashon should have been shem and lahir, they need oil for the sake of shedding light, for there to be light, not for the source of light, for the illuminary. Another question is, it says in this, there's a seemingly a contradiction. In this pasuk it says that the menorah should be kindled constantly, lahalis ner tamid. And in the pasuk right after this, it says me'erev ad beker, that the menorah is lit and should be kindled from the night to the morning. So it's not lit constantly, but just in the evening and just for the night. These are the questions. The Rebbe brings the Fidikas Nevar, the Nekudi Fidikas Nevar, the Ma'amar B'Kibbutz Yehudim, which he said Purim Katan Tafish B'Zayin, and there he explains the inner meaning of the words Tetzava. That the tzava, the literal meaning is commanded. The inner meaning is that Meir Rabbeinu is going to connect. Tzavsa v'chibur is going to connect. He's going to attach. So Meir Rabbeinu's role is Va'ata Tzav es bnei Yisrael. The Meir Rabbeinu's role is to attach Yidden with Eretz, to attach Yidden to Elokus. And through Meir being mashpia and a Yid and attaching him to Elokus, that also brings a Yisaf and a Yisr and adds an additional light, an additional energy in Meir Rabbeinu himself. Like the pasuk says, "Sheshmelas elef ragle yom asher necha b'kirbei." The Meir Rabbeinu is Meir Rabbeinu is taka mashpia and a Yid, like the head which is mashpia on the entire body. But there's also an addition which is added to Meir Rabbeinu through Yiddim, which are considered like the feet of Meir. The same way the feet bring a certain mile to the head, they bring the head to a place where the head on his own can't get there. So through the fact that Meir Rabbeinu is mashpia and a Yid, that in itself. Yidden add a new haysaf, a new addition, and a higher light in Meir Rabbeinu himself, and namely, which is the gili of Atzmos, the gili of Anoichi. Now, to explain this more in detail, first of all, what's Meir Rabbeinu's role of connecting Yid to the Eibishter, and also the addition that Bnei Yisrael bring in Meir Rabbeinu, the additional light that Yidden add in Meir Rabbeinu. So the Rebbe starts off with what the Fidik is Meirich and his Mavar Baruch elaborates in the Meir B'Kibbutz Yehudim. Now, in the Meir B'Kibbutz Yehudim, there's seemingly two distinct points which have no connection one to another, and the Rebbe is going to explain how they're essentially connected. So the first point the Fidik Rebbe explains is the role of Meir Rabbeinu, the Va'ata Tzav, Meir Rabbeinu's role, which is, it brings what it says in Zohar, that Meir Rabbeinu is called Rayim Mehemna. So there's one basic meaning that Rayim Mehemna means he's a faithful shepherd. That he doesn't elaborate about that meaning in this Maimer. What he's married in this Maimer is the second touch of Rayim Mehemna. The Meir Rabbeinu, Rayim Mehemna means that he nurtures Yidden with Emunah. What do you need Meir Rabbeinu's nurturing? Why do you need his ashpa for Emunah? Every Yid is inherently Maminim B'nei Maminim. Every Yid believes in Hashem. He has a neshama which so why do you need the ashpa of Meir Rabbeinu? So he explains that the emunah that a Yid has could be in a eifin of makif. Meir Rabbeinu's ashpa is that this emunah should be in the pnimiyus, should be internalized. Means from the nature of the emunah itself, without the ashpa of Meir Rabbeinu, so it's not necessarily that the emunah plays a central factor and guides a person in his life. It doesn't necessarily change a person's life internally. Doesn't change the way he views things, doesn't change the way his emotional attitude towards things. he has within his soul a certain certainty or a certain belief in Hashem, but that's in a sense removed from the person himself, from his own life itself. The emunah doesn't necessarily is not a factor which changes and makes an imprint on a person's life internally. Meir Shlomo Kaplen is that this emunah should be effective on a yid in a primistic way. In a primistic way means that it should actually change the way he views things, the way he understands things, the way his emotional attitude towards things. This mamshach emunah in a primistic way that it should have a real effect on a person's and be internalized in a person's life. That's Rai Memle. He nurtures a yid with emunah, that he brings this emunah and he makes it part of the flesh and blood of the person, part of the life of the person. Brings it down in a primis. And the Fitikaber brings is not only Meir Rabbeinu himself, but also the Zohar says it's Pashtus the Meir b'chol dara v'dara. In every generation there's a Meir Rabbeinu, which his tafkid is to take that the emunah that a yid has shouldn't just stay in a removed way, higher than and doesn't necessarily have an effect on a person's daily life, but the emunah should have an internal effect on a person. And he brings an example that Adaras that you have when you get to Mordechai Yehudi, that in his generation, the Mekayim Torah and Mitzvahs was connected to Mesiras Nefesh. There was many hardships in Mekayim Torah and Mitzvahs. The Gzeira of Haman was only against Yidden, which held on to their belief in Hashem. And Mordechai Yehudi, he was the one which was Ma'ir Yidden, and he strengthened their emunah, that their emunah should have an effect on their daily life to stand strong, although all the halamas that there was then and the hardships that there were then, to keep Torah and mitzvahs, but to stand strong with self-sacrifice, with Mesiras Nefesh, to learn Torah and to Mekayim mitzvahs. And the Fitikaber elaborates on the extent of Mordechai Yehudi's effect on his generation, how not only Yidden didn't entertain the thought of Kfirah, Rahman al-Islam, but he actually strengthened learning Torah on a higher level, learning Torah by Rabbim, learning Torah with Bikras. That was all thanks to the Ashpa of Mordechai Yehudi, to the Meir Shlomo of his generation, which strengthened the emunah of the Yidden, that it should have an effect, an internal effect, and change the way Yidden actually live. They should live their life practically based on the emunah. That's Meir Rabbeinu's tafkid. So that explains the inyan of Ata Tetzave, that what's Meir Rabbeinu's ashpa. What does it mean that he attaches a Yid with a Elikos? That Meir Rabbeinu's ashpa is that the emunah that a Yid has in a Elikos should actually affect and be a factor in his life. In his life. That's one point Fitikaber explains the Maimon. Another point the Fitikaber explains in the Maimon is the Maila of the Aveda of Zman HaGolus. Fitikaber discusses there. The pasuk says the Kibul Yehudim Shechelu Lasis. He brings the Taich that what does it mean that Yidden accepted upon themselves what they began doing. So it says that B'matan Torah Yidden said Nasa v'Nishma, they accepted upon themselves Torah and Mitzvahs. That was just the beginning of Yidden's commitment to Torah and Mitzvahs. When was the complete and full commitment, the ultimate commitment to Torah and Mitzvahs? That was dafke by the Zman of Purim. And the Fitikaber explains here that's something which is hard to understand. When was the time that Yidden were in the highest? When were Yidden in the highest level, in the highest state? That was the Zman of Matan Torah. After they saw the revelations of Tzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yansuf, there's a revelation of the Eibishter himself through the miraculous nisim that there was. Then Matan Torah, there was no greater revelation by Yidden the way it was in Matan Torah at that time. Mashenkin is man of Purim, is man of Gzeira Saman. That was Yidden were in the lowest state in the spiritual sense. There was also in the Gashmis, there was Halamas Vesteda, and there was hardships. Godliness was not revealed. It was Gzeiris. It was a very strong concealment and hardships in Mekayim Torah mitzvahs. And nevertheless, when Yidden were in their highest state in a spiritual sense, they were the greatest closeness to Hashem and the highest level of revelation of Elikos, of Gilui Elikos. Then that was only the beginning of their commitment. That was just the initial beginning. When did they actually complete and fully accept upon themselves the kiyum of Torah and Mitzvahs? That was dafka when Yidden were in the lowest state, in their lowest element, and there was this man of Purim. That's the people said that's a pella. And he explains that the Maila that there was Bisman Purim was that Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh. They had to have self-sacrifice, give their life. They were Mekayim Torah and Mitzvahs even at the expense of giving away their life. And that quality they did not have. That wasn't brought out from Matan Torah. The key being Mekabel Torah and Mitzvahs didn't demand self-sacrifice. Didn't demand a person giving away his whole self for it. On the contrary, that was revealed to them the greatness of Elikos. Mashenkim is man Purim, where there was hardships and there was Gzeiris. And in order for you to stay connected to Torah and Mitzvahs, they had to give their life away for Torah and Mitzvahs. So there, that Mesiras Nefesh Torah and Mitzvahs in the most greatest level. So that brought them to that was the ultimate commitment that Yidden have towards the Eibishter, a commitment which is unconditional. That a Yid is ready to sacrifice his life for the sake of doing what the Eibishter wants. that Esh was Nizgala, that emerged in the Zman of Purim, the Zman of the Gzeira Sama, which then Kima Teremitzes demanded Mesiras Nefesh. So Friedrich says that's the explanation why the ultimate Kabbalah, the ultimate and complete commitment that a Yidden accepted upon themselves, their connection to the Eibishter, their dedication to the Eibishter, that was by Zman of Purim, not by Matan Torah, because in the sense of self-sacrifice towards the Eibishter, in the sense of that your connection, the dedication to Elokus is an unconditional connection, even at the expense of giving away your life, that Indian was Nizgala and came to its Nizgala by Zman of Purim. And that's what the Friedrich explains. That's what the Pasuk says, Kosis Lamot, that when Yidden are crushed, and then they're in order for them to fulfill Torah and mitzvahs, it demands self-sacrifice. It demands giving their life away for the sake of keeping Torah and mitzvahs. Their causes, they're crushed. So then that brings out the essence of Yid. That brings out, that expresses, and that reveals the etzem and neshama of a Yid, the essence and the core of a Jew. That his connection to Elokus is beyond any limitations. He's ready to give his life away for the sake of nature. That's Kosis Lamar. That when is it revealed? The Mar, the source of the light, the source of the soul, the essence of the soul, the core of the neshama. That's Nizgala through it in a time of Kosis, in a time when Yidden need Mesiras Nefesh and Mekayim Torah mitzvahs. So L'chura in the Maimer of the Friedrich we have two points in the Maimer. Number one, he explains the Ashpa of Meir Shlomo Kaplen is to attach Yidden to the Eibishter, to being mamshech the emunah b'pnimis. And then we have another explanation. What does Kosis Lamar mean? Why that in a time of Kosis, in a time where there's hardship in the Mekayim Torah mitzvahs, that is Megala, the etzem neshama, because then you need to be Mekayim Torah mitzvahs inside Mesiras Nefesh. The question is, what's the connection between these two inyanim? And the mashmas in the Maimer is that the biur habizman agolis through Mesiras Nefesh, the etzem neshama is revealed. That is connected and comes in continuation to the idea that Meir Shlomo connects Eid with the Eibishter. So that's what we have to understand. And here the Rebbe, in order to explain this, the Rebbe gives goes in to explain what is the reason why the emunah, the way a Yid has it inherently, the way it is naturally without the effect of Moshe Rabbeinu, is in a more removed way. That affects that Yid's emunah should be in a primis. What's the reason for it? And he explains that the emunah that a Yid has, the fact that a Yid believes in the Eibishter, has a certainty in Elokus, and it doesn't need any proof. It doesn't have to be proven the fact that there's a Elokus. Doesn't need any rationale for the fact that there's a Elokus. A Yid has an inherent certainty, an inherent faith in Hashem. Now, the source of this faith, there's two explanations. Number one is because you have the neshama, before the neshama came down into the body. You have the way the neshama is in higher worlds, and the higher level of the neshama. And there, the neshama has a direct vision of Elokus. Mazlechaz, the source of the neshama Lamayla has a vision, sees Elokus. That's a direct contact with Elokus. So therefore, the person, when the neshama is mlubash in the guf, the person doesn't experience this vision. The person in a body doesn't see godliness. The neshama sees godliness. But since the neshama shalamayla is connected, there's some connection between the neshama shalamayla with the neshama which comes down to the body. So the result of the fact that the neshama sees Elokus, that affects that the person here in this world, and when the neshama is mlubash in the guf, he has a certainty in godliness, even though the experience of seeing Elokus itself, that the person down here doesn't experience it. But the result of that experience, the result of the fact that the neshama sees Elokus, so that is effective on the neshama mlubash beguf, that he doesn't need any proof for the fact that there's Elokus. He has faith in it, he has certainty in it without a proof, because the neshama, the way it is in higher worlds, has a direct vision, has a direct Elokus is seen to the neshama. That's one explanation. Where is the source of the fact that a Yid has a munah in Elokus? Another explanation is that the reason why a Yid believes in the Eibishter and has faith in Elokus without needing any proof for it is because the faith in Hashem, being connected to Hashem, that is the very core, that is the very essence of a neshama. It's not that the neshama is this independent entity which experiences godliness, which has great experiences of God, sees godliness. But the neshama in its very core, what is the essence of the soul? The essence of the soul is connection with God, unity with God. Since that's the essence of the soul, therefore a Yid doesn't need proof for the fact that there's Elokus, because that's his very essence, that's his very core. His very core is connection to Hashem, unity with Hashem. Now the Rebbe explains that there's two differences. The emunah, the way it comes from the fact that the neshama shalamayla sees Elokus, and the emunah which originates in the fact that the neshama by its very essence is connection with Hashem. There's two differences that come out of the way the emunah is affected on the person down here in this world. When the source of the emunah of a yid is, because the neshama shalamayla, his neshama, the way it is in higher levels, sees a lukus. So then the neshama shalamayla is in a higher realm, in a higher plane of being than the neshama, the way it is melubash and guf. The neshama, the way it is melubash and guf, is in a state that it has some contact with the world of the guf. It's not on the same level as the neshama, the way it is higher than being melubash and guf. That's in a much more spiritual and elevated state. And therefore, since the source of the emunah is from the neshama, the way it is on a higher level, on a higher than the neshama, the way it is in melubash and guf, so its effect on the person is a more external effect, a more removed effect. Because the source of the emunah is from a level of the neshama, the way it's removed and higher than the neshama, which is melubash and guf. And therefore, its effect on the person is also as something outside of him which affects him. It's not him himself. It's higher than him. And therefore, the emunah is going to be in a market to go away. It's not going to have an internal imprint. It's not going to have an effect on a person's life because it originates in an experience which is higher than the person himself. When you speak about the fact that the emunah stems from the idea that the neshama is one with God, its core is godliness. So the etzem of the neshama, the essence of the soul, the core of the soul is not just the core. It's not just another level of the neshama. That is the core that from there stems all levels of the neshama. The neshama, the way it comes down in the body, that's the core of that level, the source of that level, and its essence is the etzem neshama himself, the core of the soul, which is one with God. So the emunah, the way it originates in the etzem of the neshama, that's not just as something removed. That's not that there's something removed affecting the person. That is that his own very essence, his own core, affects him. When a person's own core affects it, so that's not an external effect. That's not a removed effect. That gives the person the feeling that godliness is something which that's what his life is built up. So so how is it that Meir Shlomo has the ability to affect that godliness and belief in God should be something which should affect a person in an internal way, should affect his mind and affect his heart? That's because he reveals the emunah, the way it originates in the etzem of the neshama, the way it is from the very essence and the core of a yid's being, and from that respect, belief in Hashem, connection to Hashem, is a person's very inner being. That's his very core, and therefore that gives the person the ability that it should have an effect on his very life, on his way of understanding and his way of feeling. So that's one difference that there is when the difference between if the emunah and the neshama comes from the fact that the neshama has from the higher levels of the soul, or it comes from the very essence and the core of the soul. That when it comes from the neshama shalmaila, which sees, since the neshama shalmaila is higher than the neshama melubash beguf, so its effect is as something higher affecting something lower, and then the higher always stays removed, and the effect is removed. The fact that the emunah comes from the etzem neshama, that's something within you affecting you. So that gives you the ability that the connection to Hashem should be something which should actually internalize by you and should affect your way of understanding and your way of living. That's number one. Number two, that also another point difference that the Rebbe brings out is that if the source of the fact that a yid has faith in Hashem, a yid's connection to Hashem comes from that the neshama which is higher than being melubash and guf, sees godliness. So that doesn't necessarily bring about that a yid's going to be ready to give away his whole life, give away his whole self for the sake of Hashem, for the sake of this emunah, for this faith. Now, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that the Meir Shlomo that a yid has doesn't come from the fact that a yid has such strong certainty in godliness, such a strong certainty, and therefore he's so involved intellectually with this connection that he gives away everything for this connection. The Alter Rebbe says that a yid's Meir Shlomo, even simple yid were Meir Shlomo, and the source of the Meir Shlomo was because a yid cannot detach himself from the Eibush. So Meir Shlomo comes from the fact that a yid gives his life away for Hashem is because it comes from this feeling that elikus, godliness, that's his very essence. That's really who he is. And therefore, if that's who he is, there's no way that he could give it up. There's no way that he could detach himself from it. So if the emunah stems from the fact that he's connected to Hashem, stems from the fact that his neshama shalamayla has this lofty godly experience. So at the end of the day, it's an experience, it's a vision. But the neshama itself is an entity for itself, which has a vision of godliness. Then that connection can be detached. And a person won't necessarily give away his whole life for the sake of Hashem. You won't have this feeling that he can't detach himself from godliness. But when the emunah stems from the fact that he is connected to Hashem, stems from the very essence of his neshama, then his very essence means that that's who he is. That's his core. His core is connected to God. When a Yid feels that that's his core, he cannot, from that aspect, he cannot detach himself from Hashem. Because being connected to Hashem, that is what he is. And therefore he can't detach himself from it, because that is his very being. So we have two differences. And the difference is the way the neshama affects, the way the emunah affects the person. If the emunah stems from the fact that the neshama experiences God, it sees God, or the emunah comes from the etzem neshama, the core of the soul, which its very core is connection to God. Number one, when the emunah stems from the fact that the neshama sees godliness, has a more removed type of effect on the person. It doesn't change him internally. When the emunah stems from the fact that that's your very core, so it has an internal effect on the person. It changes his actual life. Number two, when the emunah comes from the fact that the neshama experiences God, so the experience of God, that doesn't mean that its essence is being connected to God. Then it could be detached. So that won't demand the idea of Meir Shlomo. Meir Shlomo comes from the Yid senses that he cannot detach himself from God. That comes from the fact that a Yid and godliness are really one. Connection to Elokus, that's a Yid's essence. And therefore he can't deny his connection to Hashem. Now according to this, the Rebbe explains seeming certain shverikite that there is in what the Friedrich explains in the Meir. Friedrich says in the Meir that the tafkid of Meir Shlomo is Rayim Mehemne to mamshech emunah b'pnimis. Now, the way it was for Meir Shlomo himself, Meir Shlomo's tafkid was to be mamshech das navkus. That faith in Hashem should have an effect on the way a Yid understands, the way the way he views things, the way he feels things. So that's what does it mean that it's mamshech emunah b'pnimis? That it has a literal impact on his very life, on his attitude, on his way of understanding. That's when it comes to Meir Shlomo himself. The Friedrich explains how in later generations the tafkid of Bnei Yisrael was to strengthen the Yid's emunah to mamshech in pnimis. He brings an example of Mordechai Yehudi. When Mordechai Yehudi, what his effect was not necessarily in giving Yidden an understanding of godliness, bringing that the emunah should be something which should affect them, affect their understanding, and affect their attitude towards things. Figure brings out that through the Ashpa of Moshe, when Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh, they had self-sacrifice. They gave their life away for Elokus. So that l'chura is not Moshe Rabbeinu's job was to give Yidden an understanding and to internalize in an internalized way your faith in Hashem. And Mordechai Yehudi's Ashpa was that Yidden should have Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice. That's not an idea of understanding or a higher feeling towards Elokus or a deeper understanding of Elokus. But it is that a Yid should be ready to give away his life for the sake of Hashem. That's the two different hashpais, two different tinyanim. Mesiras Nefesh are giving Yidden hasagin Elokus, das and Elokus. But according to what we explained earlier, the Rebbe explains like this: the essence of Meir Shlomo is the lashon of the Zayir is Meir Shlomo is Rayim Mehemne. Till now we tie it. Rayim Mehemne means that he nurtures Yidden with emunah. Here the Rebbe says the literal meaning of Rayim Mehemne is that he nurtures his raya the emunah itself. What does it mean his raya the emunah itself? So according to the way we understood earlier, it's understood. Every Yid has emunah in Hashem. The question is where the emunah stems from, where it originates from. Meir Shlomo's tafkid was that the emunah should originate from the deeper essence of a Yid, from the very core of a Yid. That's Meir Shlomo's main goal. That the essence of a Yid should emerge and should be revealed and should be affected, should be active. The emunah, the way Yid has naturally without Meir Shlomo's ashpa, is from the higher levels of the soul, from the neshama shalamayla, but not necessarily from a Jew's essence, from a Yid's core. Meir Shlomo's tafkid is to nurture the emunah, that the emunah should stem and should be revealed from its very essence, from the essence of the Yid's neshama. Now, what's the result of revealing the way it is mitzad the etzem of the neshama? The result is in two ways. So the main tafkid of Meir Shlomo is to reveal that the emunah should originate the way it is inside the etzem of a Yid. How does that affect a person practically? How does it look when the emunah doesn't only stem from the neshama shalamayla, but it stems from the etzem? There could be two various ways how the effect of the etzem is going to make a change. One difference is that when the emunah stems from a person's etzem, that's your core. That gives the person the ability to actually internalize godliness, to internalize the Elokus. You should comprehend it. You should understand it. You should view things that way based on that emunah, because the emunah is his very essence, his very core. So that's not something outside of him affecting him, but it's something within him himself. So that's one effect of Meir Shlomo, and that was Meir Shlomo himself. The tafkid was to megal the etzem neshama. And what did it play itself out in? What was the effect? What was the result of being megal the etzem neshama? That a Yidden had das and Elokus. Mordechai Yehudi's job was also the same thing. He was being megala the emunah that it should stem. He was being mefanes the emunah itself. He was nurturing the emunah itself that it should stem from a deeper place of Yid, from the essence of Yid. What was the result of Moshe Rabbeinu's days? That mitzad the fact that he was megala the emunah the way it is inside the essence of a Yid, inside the etzem of a Yid, Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh. They gave their life away. They felt that they cannot detach themselves from Elokus. So in essence, Moshe Rabbeinu and Mordechai Yehudi, all Moshe, the Moshe Rabbeinu of every generation, his tafkid is that the emunah should stem not from great higher levels of the soul, but the emunah should stem from the very essence, the very core of a Yid's being. The result of that could be many different results. There's one result that as a result of the fact that the emunah comes from etzem neshama, a Yid's understanding changes. And that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Another result is that a Yid is ready to give away his life for the sake of Torah. He cannot detach himself from Elokus, which that is Mordechai Yehudi's effect. Oh. So the Rebbe says, according to this, we can understand the connection between the Frierdiker Rebbe's explanation, Kosis Lamar, and what he explains, Va'ata Tzav es Bnei Yisrael. When the Frierdiker Rebbe says in the Maimer that in a time of Kosis, in a time where Yidden are crushed, so that is Megala the Etzem HaNeshama, that's not just a separate idea, not relevant, not associated with the idea of Va'ata Tzav Moshe Rabbeinu's hashpah. That's all in continuation. That's all coming behemshach to speaking about what the tafkid of Moshe Rabbeinu the Raya Mehemna is. The Frierdiker Rebbe is saying the Moshe Rabbeinu's Indian is Va'ata Tzav es Bnei Yisrael is to attach a Yid to Elokus. What does it mean to attach a Yid with the Yevishter? That a Yid's connection to Elokus should stem from his essence. That his very essence is oneness with Hashem. Kosis Lamar is that this hashpah of Moshe Rabbeinu's hashpah, that a Yid's emunah should stem from his etzem, that's revealed in a much stronger way, in a much clearer way, in a much more apparent way, through in a time of Kosis where Yidden need Mesiras Nefesh. And then the result of Moshe Rabbeinu's being Megal the etzem HaNeshama results itself in giving away your life for the sake of the Eibishter, in the sense that you cannot detach yourself. That reveals the etzem in a much stronger way. Why does it reveal the etzem in a much stronger way? So the Rebbe explains that when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu himself, at the end of the day, what was apparent was Moshe Rabbeinu was doing Melamed Das in Israel. He was giving them understanding. He was giving them that it should change their external self. They should have a different view. Their view should be based according to Elokus. They should have Das in Elokus. They should have Hargosh in Elokus. So what's apparent is not the etzem itself. The etzem itself is that its essence is oneness with Hashem. That's not seen in Moshe Rabbeinu's hashpah. How is it that he's able to affect, that a Yid should be able to actually comprehend godliness, that he should actually feel that godliness is something which he is able to connect to in an internal way? It stems from the fact that a Yid, the etzem, is one with Hashem. But that oneness with Hashem is not revealed on the surface of the fact that he understands Hashem. What's seen is that he has an understanding in godliness, that he feels kaviyachol comfortable with godliness, but not that he's one with Hashem, that his core is godliness. The fact that he's able to understand the Elokus is because his emunah is his etzem. Mashiki through Mordechai Yehudi Mesiras Nefesh is an open expression of the etzem HaNeshama. Because what's the sense of Mesiras Nefesh? The feeling of Mesiras Nefesh is that I cannot detach myself from God. That is a revelation. That's an expression. That's the hisgalus of the etzem HaNeshama. The etzem HaNeshama is that God, that its connection to Hashem. That's its very being. What is the core of the neshama? It's oneness with Hashem. And that is what is felt, that is what is openly apparent when it comes to Mesiras Nefesh. That I cannot detach myself from Elokus, that a Yid with Elokus is one thing. So therefore, Kosis Lamar, the fact that in a time when a Yidden were a Shverikite, and they needed Mesiras Nefesh, that brought out the Mohus of Moshe of Raya Mehemna in a much more open and apparent way. So Kosis Lamar comes behemshach to Va'ata Tzav. Now the Rebbe adds another point that when was it that the entire Klal Yisrael had Mesiras Nefesh? That was in the time of Purim. Even in the time of Hanukkah, that wasn't the entire Klal Yisrael. When was there the only time that the entire Klal Yisrael had Mesiras Nefesh for the sake of Torah and mitzvahs? That was in the time of the Purim. And that's why it says that Mordechai the Rebbe explains that's also maybe what it says in Medrash, that Mordechai b'Doire is equal, is shokol like Moshe b'Doire. The Gemara says is Pashush Moshe b'chol dara v'dara. Every dara has a Moshe Rabbeinu. So why are we specifying that Mordechai is equal to Moshe Rabbeinu? So the Rebbe says the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu was not only that he was the Raya Mehemna, but his effect as the Raya Mehemna was open and apparent to the entire generation. He actually affected in a revealed way the entire generation. The fact that he was a Raya, the fact that he nurtured Yidden, wasn't in a concealed way, but it had an open effect on his entire generation. The entire generation is called a Der Deya. He changed them in a revealed and open way. And al der's was negate to Mordechai Yehudi that his effect as a Raya Mehemna had a revealed and apparent effect on his entire generation. That the entire generation stood in a mode of Mesiras Nefesh. And the Rebbe says in the Maimer that the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings this in the Maimer is because Pasek Val Maimer Sedin Al Atzmei. When a Rebbe says something about another Rebbe, so that is also like the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, so that is he's saying and he's bringing out also when he gets himself Pasek Adin Al Atzmei, that he was also the Rai Mehemna, not just in a concealed way but in a revealed way for all people of his generation. So that's one point in the Maimer. But there's still something which has to be understood. According to this explanation, when we're dealing with the pasuk Va'ata Tetzaveh, so the pasuk says like this: Va'ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael v'Yikchol Hashem and Zayizach Choshes Lamar. So the way we understand it till now is that Va'ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael is a Meir Shlomo Kaplen attaches a yid Telukus, that it brings that the yid's really in essence one with godliness. And then Choshes Lamar is a continuation to Meir Shlomo's attachment that Meir Shlomo affects. That when Meir Shlomo affects the attachment in a time of Choshes, in a time of when there's Gzeiris, so then that brings out the etzem, that brings out the mar in a much more revealed and apparent way. But if so, the words Choshes Lamar should have been before V'Yikol. The pasuk says the Va'ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael, the Yidden are gonna, the Meir Shlomo attaches the Yidden and they bring oil. Then when do we bring out the Va'ata Tetzaveh Bnei Yisrael? When does the pasuk says? When does the pasuk say that they're going to bring crushed oil? It says that Yidden are going to bring crushed oil. So Mashma says that the inyan of Choshes Lamar is not mitzad Moshe Rabbeinu's hashpah itself, but it's something which that's what Yidden bring. That comes from Yidden's Avodah. The Bnei Yisrael, the reverence in the beginning of the Maimer that the Frierdiker Rebbe says, what's that Hashem and Zayizah? That la'achle Moshe Rabbeinu's hashpah and a Yid, that a Yid also affects a higher face-bis an additional energy in Moshe Rabbeinu himself. So according to the Rebbe explained till now, Kos is the fact that Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh, that didn't result from Yidden, that resulted from Mordechai Yehudi, that resulted from Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Choshes Lamar didn't stem from Bnei Yisrael, it stemmed from Moshe Rabbeinu. It stemmed from the Nasi, from the Pashtus of the Moshe, from Mordechai Yehudi. For the pasuk is mashma that the Choshes Lamar, the crushing is which brings out the mar, that comes from a Yid, that comes from Bnei Yisrael. That's from the additional energy which is added through a Yid's Avodah. So this you have to understand. According to the way we understand the Indian till now, the Choshes Lamar also stems from Mordechai Yehudi himself. Yeah, so to understand this, we have to have a better understanding of the Indian of Choshes Lamar. The Rebbe brings before that the Frierdiker Rebbe says that the pasuk says v'kibul hudim shechilu lasis, that the zman of Purim, that's when there was the ultimate and complete commitment to Torah mitzvahs. And why was then the ultimate complete commitment to Torah mitzvahs? Because then Torah mitzvahs was Mesiras Nefesh. So the Frierdiker Rebbe explains the pasuk v'kibul hudim in regards to the time when there was the Gzeiris, there was hardships. And Yidden had in order to do Torah mitzvahs, he needed the Mesiras Nefesh to be ready to give their life away for Torah mitzvahs. But the truth is that the simple pashas of the pasuk of Kibul Yehudim is not talking about the Zman of the Gzeir. It's talking about the Zman the way it was after the Gzeir, after the Nes. And the Yidden rejoiced on the Yeshua that they had one mile. And then it says Kibul Yehudim Shirachelu Lasis. So the Kabbalah that the Megillah speaks about, the pashas of Dvarim is not mitzad the Torah mitzvahs the way it was during the Gzeiris, but in this after the Nes, when they were rescued, when there was the Gilim Ma'il. So the Rebbe says that in truth, what do we see from this passage? That the ultimate Kabbalah, according to the Frierdiker, explains the the Kabbalah was in this man of the Gzeiris, and he explains that Choshes Lamar, because when there's a time of Choshes, that's when the Yid brings out the true essence of the Yid. Pashas of the pasuk is saying that when was there the ultimate commitment, the ultimate connection of the Yid to Elokus was not in this man of the Gzeiris, but in this man after the Gzeiris. And that's also connected to the idea of Choshes Lamar, that there's the ultimate commitment, the ultimate revelation that a Yid and Elokus is one. There is the ultimate connection of Yid with Elokus, which is revealed through Mesiras Nefesh. And there's another level in the revelation and the commitment of a Yid to Elokus, that a Yid and Elokus are one akuda, they're one. The essence of the Yid, which would emerge and was this Gala, not during this man of the Gzeiris, but in this man of the Nes, when was Lahudim Ma'asayra. And that's also connected to Choshes Lamar. What is the Choshes Lamar? The Rebbe says that there's a different Choshes, not a Choshes that comes from this Gzeiris. That brings Mesiras Nefesh. That's Mesiras Nefesh. There's another eighth of Choshes. That even when a Yid there's Lahudim Ma'asayra, there's Simcha V'Sasam V'Ikar. There's Archav V'Gashmis, there's Simcha V'Sasam V'Ikar in a literal way. There's light, and there's joy, and there's happiness, there's abundance, and there's physical, all their needs are they have whatever they need in a archavic way, and all that is a beruchni spiritually. There's Utayra, there was Yomtiv and Mila, there was all the in a ruchnistic sense they had an abundance of the Gidei Lukus. But after they became, they were still in Golus, they were still under the Malchus of Achashverosh. And the fact that a Yid's in Golus, a Yid's broken from the very fact that he's in Golus. The fact that his Mikdash wasn't rebuilt, and he's under the Mlucha of Achashverosh. From that, a Yid is broken and he's crushed. He's crushed from the fact that he's in Galus. And this brokenness, and the fact that we're in Galus, that also, this brokenness of a Yid, not the brokenness that comes from Gzeiris. The brokenness that a Yid is subrachem from the fact that he's in Galus, that also brings out the essence of a Yid, the fact that Yid and Elokus are one. Now, what do we see in the fact that Yid is broken, that we're in Galus, that brings out the essence of the Yid? So the Rebbe says the fact that Yid is broken from being in Galus, that even though he has whatever he needs, he's not broken because he's lacking something. In the literal sense, he has whatever he needs. The Gashmi has whatever he needs. Ruchni he has whatever he needs. Why is he's broken even though he has whatever he needs? Because the true will of a Yid, the true desire of a Yid is not to have abundance, not to live a good life, and not to have whatever he needs. But the true desire of a Yid is that a Lukus should be Bizgalus, that there should be Gidei Lukus. And this desire that a Yid has to be Gidei Lukus is something which touches him and bothers him to his very core, to the very essence of his being. His very essence of his being is shattered or is touched from the fact that there's no Gidei Lukus. That's his true will, and a true will, which this desire is something which he cares about, and it touches him in his very core, in his very essence. It's not just would enhance his life, would enhance his life to have Gidei Lukus, but his very life is dependent and can only function normally. His very being can only function normally when the Eibusher is Bizgalus. That's his true will, which is neged to him, to his very core. And therefore, the fact that there's not a Galus, there's no Gidei Lukus. There's no Gidei Lukus the way it was not a bias. And the Yizmas Bennett, the Churban didn't only happen thousands of years ago, but the Churban is a continuous thing. The Gemara says, the Shami says that whoever the Mikdash wasn't rebuilt, so it's as if it's destruct. It's as if the Churban is happening now. When he thinks about it, so that brings the Yid to be in a state of he's completely shooken up from the fact that the Gidei Lukus, the Bisman bias is not here. And even if we're dealing with Yiddish in the highest level, that's Meir Behem Gidei Lukus, and a very high Gidei Lukus, and even if it's Meir Behem the Gidei Lukus, the way it was Bisman bias, like the Spartan Chassidus, they have great tzaddikim like the Rashbi, then but then the Churban wasn't paying anything, and the same Gidei that was Meir Bisman bias is Meir today also, by then. But still, from the very fact that this Gidei Lukus is not in the entire world, that shows that even the Gidei Lukus where it does shine, is also not Bizgalus, the ultimate infinity and the ultimate unlimitedness of a Lukus. From the fact that there's one place in the world that's lacking Gidei Lukus, that shows that even where there is Gidei Lukus, it's in a limited fashion. Because if the ultimate Ein Sof of a Lukus, the Eibusher's, the infinite light of Hashem would have been revealed even in one place in the world, then it would affect every single place in the world. So the Alter Rebbe says that it says in Zohar that if one tzaddik in a generation would have a complete tshuva, then Mashiach would then Mashiach would come, because through tshuva a yid through a complete tshuva, so that brings down the Gilei Eretz Ablikbo of the Eibishter, and if the Eretz Ablikbo is big Gilei in one place in the world, it would affect the entire world. So the fact that the whole world there isn't Gilei Lukus in the entire world, that means that by any tzaddik in the generation there isn't a complete tshuva. So from the fact that it's not Meir Ben the Gilei of Atzma saying itself, the Eibusher himself is not revealed. So a Yid is broken and crushed. He's crushed. He's broken and is Erzubrach. Now, that like it's known that the Hebrew word for being ill is chayla. Chayla is the numerical value is 49. That even if a Yid is Meir, the highest levels of the Giluim of Elokus, but if he's lacking the highest revelation of the bleak bull of Elokus, so he's missing the Shar Anon, so a Yid's ill. He can't function straight. The normal function of a Yid is when the Eibusher himself is revealed. And if there isn't the Gilei of Atzma Seder itself, then a Yid, that's not called functioning normally. So the Rebbe brings, that's also what it's known what the Tzemach Tzedek writes, that it would be heard from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe used to say that I don't want anything. I don't desire anything. I don't desire Gan Eden. I don't desire Elam Habe. I don't desire anything aside for you alone, for the Eibusher himself. The Rebbe says the fact that this lashon was heard from the Alter Rebbe, and then the fact that Tzemach Tzedek was mefarsim it, and the Mashmos, I skipped the part. Mashmos is the fact that Tzemach Tzedek writes that this lashon used to be heard, would be heard from. We would hear from the Alter Rebbe. So Mashmos says that it's not like the Alter Rebbe said this in special occasions, as manim of Vegas. That was a regular, frequent thing. The Alter Rebbe used to say that he only wants the Eibusher himself. fact that the Rebbe that used to be heard constantly and in a regular way, frequently from the Alter Rebbe, and some Tzaddik was mefarsim it. So that gave every single Yid the ability that his primary desire should be that there should be Gilui Atzmos, that the Eibusher himself should be in an open and a revealed way. And at Kedei Kach, and when this Gilui is not Meir, then it touches him to his very core. He's crushed to his very core. And the frater, it's not that especially when it's not only that the Gilui Atzmos is not Meir, but even lower levels aren't Bizgalus. And it's not Meir, even the Gilui the way it was Bisman Abayis, so that touches the Yid to his very core, and the Yid is completely broken, and he's crushed, and the Yid asks time and again, 3 times a day or more, that we should see with our own eyes the Eibusher's return to Tzion, the Gilui B'Ashlev, which then is going to be the Gilui Atzmos. Now the Rebbe says that the fact that that's also the explanation. Well, that's another beer in Koshes Lamor. You have Koshes Lamor that there's Gzeiris, and that Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh brings out that a Yid in the Lokos, a Yid can't be detached from the Eibusher. But then there is the Etzem of Yid, the way it's brought out by being crushed, that there isn't Gilui Lokus in the world. The Mashiach doesn't come. The fact that the primary ratzon of every single Yid is that there should be Gilui Lokus, and this ratzon is not just some additional ratzon, but that's this desire is negeh to Yid in his very essence. That's because a Yid's very essence is oneness with Hashem. The core of a Yid is being united, being one with Elokus. So Shas, the Eibusher is not Meir, that touches him in his very essence. He cannot be complete. He cannot exist without Gilui Elokus. He can't function without Gilui Elokus. So that also expresses that a Yid's core, a Yid's essence is being one with Hashem. And when he doesn't have it, when it's not Gilui, when it's not apparent, when there's concealment in Elokus, it touches him to his very core. Because the Yid in Elokus is one etzem. So here we have 2 biurim. You have the Kibbul Hudim Sheichel Lasis, that's the complete commitment. When was in this Gala that a Yid in Elokus is really one essence, one thing, you can't detach Yid from the Eibusher. You have the way it is with Zman HaGzeiris, and the Yid is Meser Nefesh. Meser Nefesh comes from the fact that a Yid can't detach himself. That's one way of they have the expression of the Etzman Hashem. Another way you have the expression of the Etzman Hashem is that a Yid's desire is, and a desire which his whole essence is dependent on this desire, is that the Eibusher should be revealed. And that also brings out the etzem of a Yid, that a Yid and the Eibusher are really one. And they can't exist. A Yid can't exist without a Elokus. So that's 2 extensions of Koshes Lamor. So the Rebbe adds here, it's based on what we said before, that the Kibbul Yehudim means that one was the ultimate commitment, the ultimate Tizgalus that a Yid and the Elokus is one, that was in the Zman of Purim. So you have the Kabbalah the way it was with Zman HaGzeiris. You have the Kabbalah the way it is in the Zman of after when there was the Nest. So the Rebbe says in a certain way, the Rebbe says that the Gilui of the Etzem of a Yid, the fact that a Yid and a Elokus are one, that what is the essence of a Yid, oneness with Hashem, that's brought out in a more deeper way, in a stronger way. The oneness of a Yid with Elokus is brought out in a much stronger way in the fact that a Yid's broken, that we're in Galus, even more than the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. Even though the Mesiras Nefesh comes from the fact that a Yid you cannot detach it from Elokus, but still, in a certain sense, where is it Nizgala in the fullest Eifen? The true essence of a Yid, that a Yid's one with Elokus, is brought out in the Inyan that a Yid's broken, in fact that we're in Galus. What's the explanation? So the Rebbe explains like this. We find the Chassidus, Rebbe brought before, what's the reason why the ultimate commitment, the ultimate Kabbalah was the Zman of Purim? The Rebbe says because that's when the Yid had Mesiras Nefesh. But there's another explanation of Chassidus. Chassidus explains that the reason why the ultimate Kabbalah was the Zman of Purim, not the Zman of Torah, is because the fact that Yidden said Nasa v'Nishma, they accepted upon themselves Torah mitzvahs, Bisman Matan Torah wasn't mitzvah, it wasn't from their own accord. It wasn't their own personal decision on their own. That was, they were persuaded by the Gilim O'Mayla. Kafalei Harkegigis, there was a great Gilim O'Mayla, which that inspired them and that affected them to want to accept Torah mitzvahs. That was Matan Torah. So the fact that they accepted Torah mitzvahs was, that wasn't from their own, that wasn't their own personal, from their own accord, from their own self. That stemmed from Elokus affected them. Inkim is man Purim, where there was a hell of a Hester, the fact that Yidden accepted upon themselves Torah mitzvahs was, that was on their own accord, it's on their own ratzon. So the Rebbe says, that's also massive, what the Frierdiker Rebbe explains earlier, that the reason why Bisman Purim, there was the ultimate Kabbalah, wasn't inside Mesiras Nefesh. Because in a certain way, like the Rebbe explained before, the difference between, when you say the Emunah, when is a Yid's connection to Elokus, doesn't bring it to Mesiras Nefesh. That's when the Emunah stems from the Neshama Shalamayla, which sees Elokus. So that is that the fact that he's connected to Lakus is because he's affected by a higher energy. He's affected by a higher level, by the Neshama Shalamayla, by Gilui Lakus. That's Matan Torah. It wasn't revealed that a Yid's essence, that he himself is one with Hashem. A Yid himself is an entity for itself. A Lakus affects him, a higher energy affects him. So it affects him Mazli Chazi, or it affects him like Matan Torah, there was a Gilui Lamayla. Mash'enkin, when you speak about Mesiras Nefesh, that's the Zman of Purim. The Kabbalah comes, the fact that Yidden accepted upon themselves that came on their own accord, because that's their essence, that's their core, that's their mitzvahs. That's Mesiras Nefesh. A Yid can't detach himself from the Lakus because he is one with the Yid. So that's the Hat'ama, what the Fizik Rebbe explains, the of Kabbalah of Zman Purim was inside Mesiras Nefesh. What generally he says that the reason, the mile of the Kabbalah of Purim was that it came from a Yid's perspective, from his own accord. They accepted upon themselves from their own side. So that's the same likud that a Yid's there by Zman Purim was Nizgal that a Yid's essence is a likus. From his very being is connection with Hashem. But the Rebbe says like this: if you go by Prati Yisrael, it means if you examine the Indian more in detail, so the truth is that even Mesiras Nefesh on a certain aspect, doesn't bring out that a Yid's own mitzvahs, that a Yid's own personal reality is one with Hashem. The Rebbe is going to explain. It says like this. The Rebbe says a person, just to say it simply, that a person is built of, you have the external part of the neshama, the Rebbe calls it keches hagluim. That is the revealed or apparent faculties of the neshama. Person's seichel, a person's midas. That's keches that the neshama has. Revealed keches, the revealed qualities of the neshama. That's his seichel, his midas. That's one part of the neshama. Standing a lakos, feeling for the Eibishter. And then there's the essence of Yid. The essence of a Yid, there's no seichel, there's no midas. A Yid's muhus is being one with the Eibishter. Unity with Hashem. He doesn't have his own way of understanding things. He doesn't have his own way of feeling things. Seichel and midas is a Yid has a certain character, a certain personality. He has a way of understanding. He has a seichel. He has midas. The etzem neshama, there's no seichel, there's no midas. There's oneness with Hashem. So the Rebbe says when we're dealing with avada, the essence of a Yid is the fact not that he has seichel and midas. The essence of a Yid is the fact that he's one with Hashem, an unconditional connection and a unity with Hashem. But then there's the Yid's external self, so to speak. Is the seichel amidus. The seichel amidus, that's not the core of the Yid, but that's also kayches, which stem from the neshama. So the Rebbe says, in respect to a person's revealed self, his seichel amidus, Mesiras Nefesh is the fact that Yid's meiser nafshe, the Yid gives away his life for the Eibishter. That's not because his brain demands Mesiras Nefesh, not because his natural external self demands Mesiras Nefesh. On the contrary, B'shas Mesiras Nefesh, the etzem of a Yid is revealed. The etzem of a Yid emerges. And the etzem of a Yid, there is no self. There is oneness with Hashem. When oneness with Hashem is revealed, that what's the true essence, not as seichel, not as midas, his essence with Hashem. So Yid gives away his life. He cannot detach himself from a likud. But in respect to his natural external self, his natural external self is not affected, is not transformed, and is not connected to this Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh comes from his core, but not from the faculties which come from this core. The external self which stems from this core. Mesiras Nefesh comes from the essence of a Yid, but not from his external and apparent and visible self. It comes from the part of Yid where there is no self. But the keches hagluim of a Yid, the keches hagluim of the neshama, there the Mesiras Nefesh doesn't affect them in an eternal way. So in respect to the keches hagluim, it's as if the fact that Yid is going Mesiras Nefesh, that's because there's a higher realm of himself affecting him. His true essence is really beyond a Yid's personality, a Yid's character. It's his essence, but his essence itself is higher than his external self. You see clearly, you see Yidden that there was Zman of Zedis, so they had to Mesiras Nefesh. They had Mesiras Nefesh for not just on a rare occasion. They had Mesiras Nefesh for years, for Yar Nachanan, Meshach Kama the Kamashan. And even though they lived in a state of Mesiras Nefesh Meshach for a great amount of time, still it didn't transform their seichel, it didn't transform their external self, the way they understand things, the way their feelings, their seichel, their own self. It didn't transform. They stood with Mesiras Nefesh because the essence of Yid is not his self. The essence of Yid is unity with Hashem, giving himself away for the Eibishter. That's the essence of Yid. But the external part of Yid, the fact that he does have a sense of self, that wasn't transformed through the Mesiras Nefesh. So in respect to the Yid's keches hagluim, in respect to a Yid's open and appeared self, his external self, legabe that, The etzem neshama is beyond that. It's higher than that, and it's in a certain, even though it's their core, but it's not something which affects them in an internal way. It doesn't change the way the seichel amidus work, the way his brain and his heart feels. And that's why after they came to the Akshas Harvacha, there was no need for Mesiras Nefesh. So it's not recognizable so much. It says it's not nikr kol kach. It's not so recognizable the fact that they stood for Mesiras Nefesh Meshach so many years, because even though the etzem was made by them, but their keiches, their external self, their seichel amidus wasn't transformed, wasn't changed inside the etzem. Because the Rebbe explains the etzem, it's their core, but it's not necessarily limited and connected to the personality and to the framework of the seichel amidus. Seichel is understanding, and midus is feeling. Seichel and midus aren't changed and aren't transformed mitzad the gili of the etzem neshama. The etzem neshama is beyond understanding and feeling. It's a unconditional dedication towards the Eibishter, beyond seichel and midus. But it doesn't necessarily affect the seichel and midus. It's a Jew's etzem, but it doesn't affect his external self. In the fact that he's broken, the fact that we're in Golos, the Rebbe says that the fact that he's broken, the fact that we're in Golos, that means that even when a yid is not that his etzem is revealed, we're talking about a yid which he has seichel, he has midas, and his regular self is apparent. It's not that it's revealed. It's a higher level that he has no self. His self is there. He has seichel, he has midas, and still his seichel and midas can't function. His brain can. He's fully broken and he's completely shattered in the fact that Mashiach didn't come, the fact that the Geulah didn't come. So the fact that a yid, even not the fact that he's broken is not because it's some higher, deeper reality of himself is revealed. We're dealing with his regular natural self, and that self can't function. That self, its desire is, and to the extent that he's fully broken, his seichel can't function normally, his midas don't function normally. He's fully taken over by this essential desire to see Elokus. That's because his keiches hagluyim, his external self, was transformed, and their whole function is, their whole essence is to see Elokus. Not only the core of the yid is beyond his own self, but also the self of the yid. What is its basic desire is to see Elokus. So the Rebbe says, and that's so in a certain way, the Kabbalah, the way it was man when it was man of Archava, that's a Kabbalah that doesn't stem from there's a revelation of something deeper in a yid. Even when a yid is in his natural external self, in his revealed keiches, even there he's fully permeated by the desire of his core, that his whole desire is that Elokus should be Bizgalut. And that comes from the difference between why is it that Mesiras Nefesh doesn't transform his external self, the seichel amidus, his brain and the way he understands it and the way he feels it. And the fact that he's broken, Mashiach didn't come. So the ratzon for a yid to see Elokus, that transforms also his external self, that they can't function, that they're fully shattered. The fact that Elokus is not Bizgalus is because the causes of Zaydas bring out the etzem, the way the etzem has some definition. The definition of the etzem is that it's beyond self. It's beyond definition. It's beyond rationale. It's beyond seichel amidus. Through the fact that he gets crushed, the Mashiach didn't come, that brings out the ultimate essence of a yid, the way a yid is mushrish to the Eibishter himself, higher than any definition, and therefore a yid's unity with Hashem is also beyond any definition, beyond the definition to say that it cannot transform his own personal character, and therefore when the connection of a yid, when it's revealed that a yid's essence is oneness with Hashem himself, which Hashem is higher than is beyond any definition. It doesn't have to reveal itself in a form of going beyond itself, even from the very seichel amidus of a yid. So at the end of the day, the Rebbe is explaining here that the kosis lamar, the ultimate kosis lamar, when is the ultimate revelation of the true essence of a yid, that a yid is ultimately one with the Eibishter himself. And the same with the Eibishter himself is beyond any definition. There's the yid's desire to connect to the Eibishter is beyond any form or definition, and therefore is able to transform even his seichel amidus, even his external self. That brings out the ultimate essence of a yid, that is one with the Eibishter himself, and that's Nizgal through being broken for the fact that we're in Golos. This is the feasible understand. What the Friedrich Rebbe says that Adat Savas Bnei Yisrael is that the fact that when you're going to have the Shem and Zayis of Kosis Lamar doesn't come through Moshe Rabbeinu's Ashpa, but Kosis Lamar comes through. That's what Yidden contribute. The Yikhoy Lech Hashem and Zayis of Kosis Lamar. Yidden with their Aveda, they bring Kosis Lamar. The Rebbe says an Aveda means that Meir Shlomo is Megala Yid Etzman Hashem. Meir Shlomo is the one that he nurtures the emunah, that the emunah should stem from his etzem. That the fact that unity with Hashem is the very core of the Yid. That's brought to his galas. That's effective through Meir Shlomo. He's mamshach that. But a Yid's aveda is that this essential bond with the Elokus, that should transform his way of understanding. That should transform his feeling. And then when it transforms his external self, he brings out the ultimate and the true oneness of Yid with Hashem, that a Yid is one with the Eibusher himself, just beyond any definition. And that's the Kashes Lamar. The ultimate Mar is Nizgala through the fact that a Yid is broken, that he's in Galus, which comes because he works on himself, that his external character should be in sync, should be massive to his etzem, that his etzem is being one with Hashem. And that Rebbe adds over here that when that it says V'ata is Bnei Yisrael, even though the Friedrich was Meirach in the Maimer, V'ata is Bnei Yisrael, that Meir Shlomo connects the Yid with the Eibusher. The Rebbe adds here in this paragraph that the Pashas Akra is V'ata is Bnei Yisrael, that Meir Shlomo connects Yid between themselves. So Al Derech Zeh, the Rebbe says that V'ata is Bnei Yisrael is that the essence of Meir Shlomo is not connecting them to Hashem, not connecting them to it himself. The essence of Meir Shlomo is revealing a Yid's connection to Elokus the way it stems from the essence of Yid, from his core. From the core of the Yid, all Yidden are one. There's achdus between Yidden. So V'ata is Bnei Yisrael. Since Meir Shlomo's tafkid to megal the etzem of the Yid, that the result of that is that Yidden are connected between themselves. Inside the etzem of a Yid, inside this very core, he's one with Hashem, and he's one. The all Klal Yisrael is one. There's achdus between Yidden themselves. All Yidden are really one. And al derech zeh, when Yidden do their avodah, that their external fact, that their seichel and their midas should be in line with the desire of their etzem. So that also affects that the achdus Yisrael that there is between Yidden is not only in mitzad the etzem and higher levels of Yid, but even in a practical sense, where every Yid has his own character. Also, the way Yidden are in their physical inyanim, in their materialistic things, there's a sense of oneness between Yidden. Not only a sense of oneness because we forget about our different characters, and there's an etzem which there we're all one, we're all beyond definition. But even when every Yid has his character and he has his life and his physical life, even in that sense, we're all one. Because the gilui, the keiches haglim, the external self of the neshama, through the aveda of the Yid, becomes in line and becomes massive and becomes one with the very essence of the soul. So that's according to this, we'll also understand why the pasuk, there's one pasuk which says me'erev ad beker, that menorah is kindled by night, and one pasuk says l'hau this near Thomas. The Rebbe says we speak about Meir Shlomo Ashpa, the V'ata Tetzaveh, which that's the Migal the Etzman Hashem, which in general that's the Migal the Etzman Hashem, the way it has some definition. Only through a Yid's Aveda that a person's external self should be in line with his etzem. That a person has to work to transform his seichel amidas. His seichel amidas that he has to work, he has to change. Meir Shlomo himself but Meir Shlomo himself brings about and he's megala the Yid's essence. That itself doesn't transform the Yid's chitzenis. The etzem of a Yid, there's certain times where it's more bizgal. In times of erev, in times of tzedis, and there's a need for Mr. Snevesh, so that's more conducive to the Gidei of etzem and shamashik. In the times of Baker, when there's harchava, so then that's not a conducive time to be megal the etzem of the neshama. Then a Yid self is more apparent. In the times of Baker, in times of Gilim, when things are doing well, then the essence of a Yid that he has an unconditional and that he has no self, that's revealed in the time of tzedis. In the time of Baker, in the time of Gili, when things are doing well, then the external part of a Yid is bizgalus. He has a self, he has a seichel, he has a midas. And in order to affect that the candle should be kindled constantly, that even by day, a Yid should be burning with the connection to Hashem, there should be a ner tamid. That's by Yid affected that even his keiches haglim, even his external self, are also permeated with the passion of his etzem, that the seichel and midas, their sole interest and their sole desire is to see a lukus. So the ner tamid is affected through the v'ikhoylech. And that's why, since the ultimate tomorrow, about through Mr. Nefesh, you have the revelation of the essence of a Yid. Through the fact that Yid goes to Mr. Nefesh, that brings out that a Yid can be detached from the Eibusher. He's one with Hashem. But the ultimate revelation, the fact that Yid's one with Hashem, is through the v'ikhoylech. That Yid works on himself and he makes his keiches haglim aligned to his etzem. So that brings out that a Yid is one with the Eibusher himself, that the Eibusher is beyond any definition. Therefore, we say, Chassis Lamar behemchach tu da veda v'ikhoylech. Now, the Rebbe adds at the end of the Maimer that the Pashtus V'ata has is that the fact that there's need v'ikhoylech is also a result of that. Meir Shlomo is going to command them to bring Hashem into Meir Shlomo. What it means now in Primis Yonim is that Meir Shlomo is connecting us to the Eibusher and his being mamshach the etzem is naifin, that he gives us the power, he gives us the ability, he gives us the sinas koyach to be able to also transform our keres hagluim. Not only he reveals the etzem, and then in order to affect the keres hagluim, that's only that we have to do ourselves. But Meir Shlomo gives us the power also that the etzem should be nimshach in a way that it should transform also our external self. That's also when you get to Meir Shlomo of our generation. That the Chatmu Chadmur Nesiderenu, that his work was to awaken and to reveal the faith that every single Yid has, which stems from the core of a Yid, from the essence of a Yid, and not only that the essence should be revealed in a way that shouldn't be effective on his external self, but in a way that the etzem should also be able to affect, and they should do that. It gives them the ability to do their avodah also with their own kayach. The fact that we could serve Hashem, we could work on ourselves and transform ourselves with our own ability. That's also through the kayach of Moshe Rabbeinu, until that the ner should shine constantly without any. There shouldn't be a possibility for change, because even the keres hagluim are fully permeated with the ratzon of the etzem Hashem. And through this, through the avodah b'yid, we'll be zeicha b'karev mamish kol mitzvah shlema, and then we'll be given, of course, not only mitzvah l'mayla, but also mitzvah the mata, also mitzvah the nibra himself. And then there's going to be a Hashem, and there's going to be the hadlakas haneres, Yikol Hashem zalas nirtamed, also pashat not only b'pnimis enyan, but also b'gashmis mamish, b'zminis hashlishi, b'gula hamidus Hashem ad Mashiach tzedkenu b'karev mamish.